I used to think rock bottom was when my wife died, but my brother proved me wrong. H. He redefined the concept entirely when he decided to ruin my life for sport. It sounds insane, but here is the truth. H. My brother emptied my accounts and vanished with my girlfriend. I was heartbroken, until my 13-year-old daughter said, "Dad, H, don't worry. I handled it." Then days later, my brother called screaming. That phone call was the sweetest sound I have ever heard. Before the chaos, I thought I had the logistics of grief figured out. I am 34, a logistics manager, and a single father, H. After Lily's mom passed from cancer 3 years ago, we built a fortress of routines. We were a closed loop, H. Just the two of us against the world. Lily is not a normal 13-year-old, H. She taught herself to code at 10 and corrects my password security for fun. We were safe, stable, and happy in our quiet, controlled space. Then my brother Kyle showed up at my door with a duffel bag and a sob story. Kyle is 2 years younger and a walking disaster. He has never held a job for more than 6 months or paid a bill on time. Our parents always made excuses for him, while I was the responsible one who paid the price. When he said he was evicted and needed a place to crash for 2 weeks, every alarm bell in my head rang. Shh. I should have slammed the door in his face. But the conditioning of a lifetime is hard to break. H, and he played the "we are family" card perfectly. He looked rough, thin, and desperate, and my savior complex kicked in. Shh. I told myself it was just 2 weeks. I told myself I could help him get back on his feet. H. I ignored the knot in my stomach and stepped aside to let him into our sanctuary. It was a fatal error. H. Lily did not share my optimism or my guilt. She stood at the top of the stairs. H. Watching him drag his dirty bag across our clean hardwood floors. Her expression was not welcoming. It was clinical, like a scientist observing a dangerous pathogen. She had never liked Kyle, even when she was small. H. She saw through his charm in a way most adults never could. When I introduced them again, she didn't smile or hug him. She just tracked his movements with terrifying, silent precision. Later that night, while I was making dinner, H, she sat at the island and delivered her verdict. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "This is going to end badly." I tried to reassure her, telling her to give him a chance, but she just shook her head. H. When has giving him a chance ever worked? She asked. I had no answer for that. I thought I was being a good brother, but I was just opening the gate for the Trojan horse. 2 weeks bled into 3. Aish and Kyle's promise to find work evaporated like morning mist. He colonized my living room, H, surrounded by empty soda cans and the stale smell of corn chips. When I asked about job applications, H, he offered vague excuses about the market being tough. Brittany, who was usually sharp about these things, suddenly became his defense attorney. She touched my arm, her voice soft and pleading, telling me to be patient. H, she said, family helps family, but her eyes held a strange, insistent pressure I had never seen before. Then the schedule anomalies started appearing like cracks in a windshield. I work long hours in logistics, managing shipping containers and driver routes, so I am often gone until 6. H. Lily mentioned casually that Brittany had stopped by during the day with casserole or cookies. It seemed thoughtful on the surface, H, but the frequency was odd. Brittany worked until 4, yet Lily said she saw her car in the driveway at noon. When I asked Brittany, H, she laughed it off, claiming she had swapped shifts. Her laugh was a little too bright. The atmosphere in the house shifted from annoyed to secretive. One Tuesday, H, I came home for a forgotten file and found the house dead silent. The spare room door, usually ajar to let air circulate, was shut tight. I tried the handle instinctively, but it was locked. That was new. Kyle never locked doors. H, he was too lazy to turn a deadbolt. I knocked, and the shuffling sound from inside was frantic. When he finally opened it, H, he looked flushed and annoyed. He claimed he was changing, but he was fully dressed. Suspicion is a slow poison, H, and I was drinking it daily. A few days later, I entered through the garage quietly, trying not to wake Lily, who was napping. I heard voices in the kitchen, low and urgent. It was a hushed, intimate frequency that stops the moment a third person enters the room. As I walked in, Kyle and Brittany were standing on opposite sides of the island. They were too far apart, like magnets forced to repel. H. The silence that followed was heavy, thick with things left unsaid. Lily was not blind to the shifting dynamics in her own home. She watched them with that same calculating stare she used for complex coding problems. One evening, while we were folding laundry, H, she stopped and held up one of my shirts. She asked me if I thought Brittany and Uncle Kyle were acting weird. H. I asked her what she meant, trying to keep my voice neutral. She shrugged, dropping the shirt into the basket. H. She said they looked at each other like they shared a secret joke. I told her she was imagining things, that they were just trying to get along for my sake. She looked at me like I was being deliberately dense. Okay, Dad. H, if you say so, she said. But her tone made it clear she didn't believe me. I wanted to believe my own lie. The H, I wanted to believe that my brother was finally turning a corner and my girlfriend was just being supportive. H. The alternative was too ugly to consider. It meant that the people I trusted most were actively dismantling my life. But the gut feeling of something is wrong is rarely a liar. That weekend, I noticed something small that shattered my denial. H. Kyle had a nervous tick of tapping his fingers against his thigh when he lied. We were eating dinner, and I asked about a job lead. H. He started tapping. Then, minutes later, I asked Brittany about her schedule. She did the exact same tapping motion on the table. H. It was a mirror image. They had spent enough time together to absorb each other's subconscious habits. I felt sick. It was a Tuesday. H. The kind of mundane afternoon that usually blurs into memory without a trace. I had made reservations at an Italian place Brittany loved for our anniversary, hoping to reset the strange energy in the house. I planned to surprise her by leaving work at 2, picking her up early, and maybe taking a walk by the river before dinner. I told my assistant to clear my schedule and drove to her apartment, feeling a mix of excitement and anxiety. H. I let myself in with the spare key she gave me months ago, expecting to find her getting ready. Brittany? I called out, H. But the air was still and stale, smelling faintly of vanilla and dust. Her work bag was on the kitchen counter. The H spilling patient files onto the granite like she had dropped it in a hurry. Her laptop was open on the couch next to a half-finished cup of coffee that had gone cold. It looked like she had vanished mid-thought. I called her cell, expecting to hear a ringtone from her purse or the bathroom. Instead, a buzzing vibration rattled against the bedside table in the empty bedroom. Her phone was plugged into the wall charger, right next to a bright yellow sticky note. In her handwriting, it listed my address and the time, 2:30, underlined twice. It wasn't a reminder for her. It was a reminder of when I said I would pick her up. She was at the one place she knew I wouldn't be. I drove home in a trance, adhering rigidly to the speed limit because I couldn't afford a ticket on top of a catastrophe. The pieces clicked together with sickening precision as the miles rolled by. The locked doors, the whispers, the car in the driveway. It wasn't paranoia. It was a clear pattern of deception I had chosen to ignore. My knuckles turned white on the steering wheel as I turned onto my street. I prayed I would see an empty driveway. I pulled in at exactly 2:47 p.m., and my prayer died instantly. Both cars were there. Kyle's Beat, up Honda, and Brittany's pristine Toyota were parked side by side, almost touching bumpers. It looked domestic, comfortable, and absolutely nauseating. I cut the engine and sat there for 10 seconds, listening to the ticking of the cooling metal. The front door was unlocked. I walked in quietly, stepping over the threshold. The house was silent, except for the unmistakable sounds coming from the spare room down the hall. I stood outside that closed door and felt a strange, icy calm wash over me. A younger version of me might have kicked the door down and started swinging, but this version just felt hollow. I pulled out my phone, opened the voice recorder app, and hit the red button. I let it run for 30 seconds, capturing the giggles and the rustling sheets. It was disgusting, but it was necessary leverage. Then I knocked 3 times, sharp and hard, on the wood. The scrambling inside sounded like rats in a wall when the lights turn on. I didn't yell or scream. I leaned close to the door and spoke with the flat authority of a warehouse manager. Kyle, Brittany, you have 30 minutes to be out of my house. After that, I am calling the police for trespassing.
Your time starts now.
I turned off the recording and walked to the living room couch. I locked the door behind them, thinking the worst was over, not realizing the demolition had just begun. The silence they left behind was heavier than their departure. Brittany had cried, begging to explain, while Kyle just smirked like he had won a prize. I watched their taillights fade. Then engaged the deadbolt and security chain. I slumped onto the couch, staring at dust motes dancing in the sun. I didn't feel angry yet. I felt surgically removed from my own life. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline crash of dismantling my future in 30 minutes. At 3:30 p.m., the hiss of air brakes announced the school bus. I heard Lily's key scratch the lock. A sound that usually brought relief but now triggered nausea. She walked in, dropping her backpack with a heavy thud. She didn't call out, "I am home." She walked straight into the living room, took one look at me sitting in the dark, and stopped. Her eyes scanned my face, reading the disaster. "What happened?" she asked, her voice flat and expecting the worst. H, I didn't sugarcoat it. I told her I caught Uncle Kyle and Brittany together, that they were gone, and they weren't coming back. H, I watched her face cycle through shock, then anger, and finally settle into a terrifyingly cold acceptance.
"That's disgusting,"
she said, stripping the emotion out until they were just facts. I knew something was going on. You should have listened. She didn't say it to be cruel. She was just stating data points. She sat next to me, existing in the wreckage. We sat there for 20 minutes before the numbness wore off. "I am changing the locks," I announced. H. Lily nodded, pulling out her phone and starting to type furiously. I assumed she was texting a friend. Venting about her family imploding, so I let her be. I called a locksmith who quoted me $300 for an emergency visit. It was steep, but the price of safety is never negotiable. I needed to know that my brother's key was now just a useless piece of metal. While the locksmith drilled the deadbolts, I entered the spare room. The air still smelled like cheap body spray and betrayal. I didn't pack Kyle's things nicely. I grabbed a trash bag and shoveled his clothes, toiletries, and chargers into it. I found a receipt for dinner from 2 nights ago, a dinner he claimed he couldn't afford, and threw that into I tossed the bag onto the porch like I was taking out the garbage. It felt petty, but it felt like reclaiming my territory. Dinner was a grim affair. We ordered pizza because neither of us had the energy to cook. We ate in the living room, watching a sitcom where all problems were solved in 20 minutes. Lily was unusually quiet. Her face illuminated by the blue light of her smartphone. She wasn't watching the show. Her thumbs were flying across the screen with manic intensity. Homework? I asked, trying to be a parent. Something like that, she muttered, never looking up from her digital crusade. I went to bed early, but sleep was impossible. I lay staring at the ceiling fan, my brain replaying the audio recording from the afternoon on an endless loop. I had secured the physical house, new locks, windows checked, alarm set, but I couldn't shake the feeling of exposure. Around 2 a.m., I finally drifted off, exhausted by the emotional heavy lifting. I fell asleep thinking I had stopped the bleeding, unaware that while I slept, my bank accounts were being drained to zero. Wednesday morning dragged like a lead weight, burying me in administrative fog. I called the bank around 1 o'clock. Treating it as a routine box, checking exercise to ensure the accounts were secure. I expected to see my paycheck pending and the usual household rhythm. Instead, the mobile app loaded with a spinning wheel that felt like a mockery. When the numbers finally resolved, my breath caught in my throat. My checking account, which should have held nearly $8,000, sat at $340. I tapped the screen with trembling fingers, praying for a glitch in the system. The transaction history told a different, colder story. The 3 transfers had occurred between midnight and dawn, draining the account in rapid succession. They were efficiently spaced to avoid immediate flags, maximizing the daily transfer limits. This wasn't a clumsy smash and grab. It was a calculated extraction executed while I was staring at my ceiling fan. The timestamps matched the hours I lay awake, wondering if I had been too harsh on them. Panic surged hot and acidic as I navigated to my savings account. This was the sacred ground. Lily's college fund, our emergency cushion, the safety net I had built over a decade of overtime. The screen refreshed, and the number hit me like a physical punch to the gut. $3,200 remained of $28,000. 5 transfers were listed, some still pending, but most cleared. In one night, they had erased 10 years of discipline. My financial spine had been snapped. The fraud department representative was polite, but lethal in her assessment. She asked if anyone else had access to my credentials. I wanted to say no, but a memory surfaced. Me, sick with the flu 6 months ago, handing Brittany my phone to pay the electric bill. She had sworn she didn't look, sworn she forgot the password immediately. It was a lie. She had kept that key in her pocket, waiting for the perfect moment to unlock the vault. She didn't just steal, she harvested. I spent the afternoon at the police station, a place that smells of stale coffee and misery. I laid out the timeline, the bank statements, and the names of the thieves. The officer at the desk looked tired. He took the report, but offered zero hope. Because I had technically given her the password once. He called it, civil matter? He said recovery was unlikely and proving intent would be difficult. The law was shrugging while my life burned down around me. Walking back to my car, my phone buzzed with a security alert from my retirement fund. They had tried to access my retirement fund at noon. Likely from a rest stop on the highway. Thankfully, that account had triggered a lockout, but the intent was clear. The they weren't just running away, they were trying to salt the earth behind them. They wanted to leave me with absolutely nothing, ensuring I couldn't chase them. It was not just theft, it was a coordinated execution. I sat in the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel until my hands ached. My mortgage was due in a week. Lily needed braces next month. The grocery budget was gone. I had less than $900 to my name and 2 people who supposedly loved me speeding toward Arizona with the rest. I felt a darkness close and that was heavier than grief. I had to go home and tell my 13-year-old daughter that her father had failed to protect us. Driving home felt like a funeral procession for a life I had barely finished building. The house looked the same from the curb. But it felt like a hollow shell. I walked in, heavy with the news that would shatter Lily's world completely. She was at the kitchen table, methodically working on homework under the warm glow of the pendant light. She looked up, saw my face, and put her mechanical pencil down. "It's bad, isn't it?" she asked. I sat opposite her, too exhausted to lie. I told her everything, sparing no details about the betrayal or the numbers. I explained the empty accounts, the police's indifference, and the fact that her college fund was gone. I braced myself for a meltdown, expecting screaming or panic about our future. Instead, she got very quiet and very still. That calculating look returned, the one that made her look 10 years older. She didn't reach for a tissue, she reached for her laptop. "Dad, don't worry," she said, her voice eerily calm. H. I handled it. I blinked at her, confused by her sudden shift in demeanor. Ch. What do you mean you handled it? She spun the heavy laptop around so I could see the screen. H? I knew they would try something, she said. So I watched them. The screen was full of open windows and file directories. It displayed a folder titled Project Trojan. Inside were dozens of screenshots, chat logs, and photos. H. I guessed his email password, she said casually. H. It was password 123 because he is an idiot. She had accessed his private messages with Brittany going back 4 months. H. I leaned in, reading the text on the screen, and felt my blood run cold. Cold. It was all there. The planning, H. The mocking of my gullibility, and the exact date they planned to drain the accounts. They had been plotting this since the week he moved in. Reading their words was worse than the theft itself. H. Brittany had texted him my banking security questions, which she had memorized when I was sick. H. Kyle had joked about leaving me enough for a rope and a stool, followed by a laughing emoji. My stomach turned. H. Realizing this wasn't just desperation, it was pure malice. Lily scrolled down, her face impassive. Shh. This proves premeditation, she stated firmly. H. It proves it wasn't a civil dispute, but a conspiracy to commit fraud. She sounded like a prosecutor making a closing argument. The H. She had built a case better than the police officer I met, documenting every step of their crime in real time. H. What are we going to do with this? I asked, feeling a spark of hope ignite. Oh, I already sent it, she replied. H. She opened her sent folder. The recipient list was a mile long. She had emailed the entire dossier to our parents. H. Ensuring they saw the truth before Kyle could spin a lie. She sent it to Brittany's boss at the dental office. H. She even found the email for the HR department of the company Kyle was interviewing with in Arizona. She had nuked them. Ch. My jaw was practically on the table as I scrolled through the recipients. Lily, you can't just... I started, but stopped. H. She absolutely could, and she did. I also sent it to the fraud unit email you gave me, she added. H. And I sicked the detective. She pointed to a timestamp. She had sent it 2 hours ago. My phone started ringing immediately. It was the detective. I answered on speaker. His tone had changed completely. Mr. Daniels. H. We received an anonymous tip with significant evidence. I hung up, stunned, realizing the police were moving, because a 13-year-old did their job for them. But she wasn't done yet. Check his Facebook, she said, clicking another tab. She had logged into Kyle's account and posted a status update. It read, For anyone wondering why I vanished, I stole $43,000 from my brother after sleeping with his girlfriend. If I owe you money, don't hold your breath. It had been up for 3 hours. The comments section was a war zone of shocked friends. Esh. He can't delete it, she explained, taking a bite of a green apple. H. I changed his password and recovery email to a burner account. I looked at my daughter, this small girl in oversized pajamas, H, and felt a terrified kind of pride. She hadn't just protected us. She had orchestrated a scorched earth campaign from her bedroom. H. She had destroyed their reputation, their job prospects, and their freedom before they even reached the state line. She was a digital assassin, and she was on my side. I realized then that I had been trying to shield her from the world, but she was the one holding the shield. Why didn't you tell me? I asked quietly. She looked down for the first time. I wanted to fix it, she said softly.
You look so sad, Dad.
I didn't want you to be sad. The vulnerability cracked through her armor for a second. She wasn't just a hacker, She was a kid trying to save her dad from drowning. I walked around the table. Saturday morning broke with the shrill ring of my phone on the nightstand. I grabbed it, squinting at the unknown number, and answered. The sound on the other end wasn't speech. It was a raw, animalistic shriek. My brother was screaming so loud the speaker distorted, turning his voice into static. He was incoherent, gasping for air between curses.
You ruined everything.
He finally choked out. I sat up, wide awake, realizing the fallout had officially made landfall. He sounded like a trapped rat, and for the first time in days, I felt in control. He didn't wait for a response before launching into a litany of disasters. Apparently, Mom and Dad had called him Friday night, not to offer money, but to disown him. They had seen the dossier Lily emailed. Every text message and bank transfer laid bare. Dad told him he was ashamed to share a name with a thief. The social media post had been shared 400 times. Everyone from his high school to his old fraternity knew exactly what he was. His reputation was incinerated. It got worse. The logistics company in Arizona, the one he was banking on for his fresh start, had rescinded his offer that morning. Lily had CC'd their HR department on the evidence packet. They didn't want a grand larceny suspect handling their inventory.
I have nowhere to go,
He screamed, his voice cracking with panic.
I can't pay for the motel. We're stranded.
He was seeing the walls close in. He expected me to care. But I just listened to the silence where my sympathy used to be. Brittany wasn't spared either. In the background, I could hear her sobbing, a jagged, ugly sound. Her boss had fired her immediately upon receiving the proof. She used patient data to help steal my identity. The state dental board had already notified her of a license suspension pending investigation. She had lost her career, her income, and her standing in one stroke. She was screaming at Kyle to fix it, but there was nothing to fix. They were drowning in the deep end of the pool they chose. The final blow was almost comedic in its timing. Kyle wailed that his car was gone. Our 80-year-old grandfather, the co-signer on Kyle's Honda, had seen the family group chat. He called the lender and reported the vehicle as being in the possession of an unauthorized driver involved in a felony. The repo man had taken it from the motel lot at dawn. They were foot-bound fugitives with frozen assets. It was total systemic dismantle. Lily hadn't just fired a warning shot. She had called in an airstrike. You have to help us? Kyle demanded, shifting from rage to bargaining. Wire me $5,000. Just enough to get a lawyer and get out of here. We're family, Chase. You can't let them arrest me. The audacity took my breath away. He still thought the old rules applied. He thought family was a magic word that unlocked my wallet. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the peaceful street. I don't have $5,000, I said calmly. You stole it all, remember? He sputtered, trying to find an angle. Don't be like that. It was a mistake.
Aish, I am your brother.
That word finally snapped the last thread of my patience. No, I said, my voice dropping an octave. Aish. You stopped being my brother when you decided I was worth less than $3,000. You aren't family anymore. You are just a guy who robbed me, and now you are a guy facing consequences. I felt a weight lift off my chest. H. A burden of obligation I had carried for years. The fight drained out of him instantly. He started crying. H. Not the manipulative tears he used on Mom, but real, terrified sobbing. They're going to put me in jail, Chase. H. I can't go to jail. He sounded like a child, small and pathetic. They issued a warrant. I informed him. H. Checking the text update from the detective. Grand larceny and fraud. It's not a civil dispute anymore. You made it criminal when you touched the retirement fund. Reality was finally crashing through his delusion of invincibility. H. Please? He whispered. Chase, please. I didn't say goodbye. I just pressed the red button and ended the call. H. The silence that followed was pure bliss. I walked into the kitchen where Lily was pouring milk into a bowl of sugary cereal. She looked up, spoon hovering halfway to her mouth. Was that Uncle Kyle? She asked casually. Yeah, I said. Is he mad? She asked. He's terrified, I corrected. She nodded once, satisfied, and took a crunchy bite. She didn't look malicious. H. She looked right. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. H. It was the detective confirming they had tracked Kyle's location through his cell signal. Likely the very call he just made to me. They were picking him up at a Motel 6 2 counties over. I didn't feel the need to warn him. H. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat opposite my daughter. We ate breakfast in silence, while sirens wailed somewhere far away. H. The storm was over for us, but for Kyle, the hurricane was just making landfall. H. The sentencing hearing took place 10 weeks later on a rainy April morning. The courtroom smelled of lemon polish and nervous sweat. I sat in the back row, not to support Kyle, but to witness the end of an era. When the bailiff let him in, H. He looked small in his orange jumpsuit. He had lost weight, and his swagger was replaced by a twitchy, desperate energy. He scanned the room, locking eyes with me. He didn't see a brother anymore. He saw the witness who refused to look away. His lawyer tried to argue for probation, citing first-time offender, status and family stress. The judge wasn't buying it. Aish. She had read the text messages where they laughed about buying a boat with my retirement savings. She called the crime predatory and calculated before handing down a 3-year sentence. Kyle slumped forward. H. His forehead hitting the table with a dull thud. Brittany had already taken a plea deal for probation and license revocation. The gavel banged, sealing their fates in the permanent record of the state. Justice was served. Outside the heavy oak doors, H. My mother grabbed my arm. Her eyes were red and puffy, filled with a grief I couldn't share. He is still your brother. Chase, she whispered, her voice trembling. He made a mistake. You have to forgive him. It was the old script, the one that had enabled his behavior for decades. She wanted me to smooth things over. H. to absorb the pain so the family could pretend to be whole. But the man who paid for peace with his dignity was dead. I removed her hand from my sleeve. He didn't make a mistake, Mom. He made a plan, I said. Forgiveness is earned, not inherited. H. He hasn't earned a thing. I looked at my father, who stood silently behind her. He gave me a curt nod. H. A silent acknowledgement that I was right. We weren't a broken family, we were a pruned tree. We had cut off the rot so the rest of us could survive. I walked away, leaving the guilt on the courthouse steps. That evening, the house felt different, lighter, cleaner, safe. I found a letter in the mail pile with a correctional facility return address. It was a 3-page scrawl from Kyle, alternating between apologies and excuses. He claimed he had found God in cell block C. I didn't even finish the first paragraph. I walked to the kitchen trash can and dropped it in among the coffee grounds and eggshells. It belonged with the garbage. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. Lily was at the counter, working on a new coding project. She looked up as I tossed the letter, her eyes sharp and knowing. "Was that from him?" she asked.
"Yeah," I replied.
I didn't read it. She smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes. "Good," she said. We don't negotiate with terrorists. I laughed, realizing she was right. We weren't victims of a tragedy. We were the survivors of a siege. "You are my dad?" she said, turning back to her screen. "We're a team,"